Welcome to Fireside Reader. Here we bring you the timeless stories of classic literature, told in full, with care, and with the depth they deserve. These are the tales that have echoed through generations, novels of mystery and wonder, of tragedy and triumph, of human longing and imagination. Each work you'll hear is drawn from the public domain, freely given, but retold here so that you can sink into the words as though they were written for today. Our aim is simple: to create a space where stories breathe again. Stories you can listen to by the fire, on the road, or in the quiet hours of the night. Settle in, let the world fall away, and step with us into a story that has stood the test of time. You are listening to Frankenstein, told by Fireside Reader. Act 1, Walton's Letters. Our story begins not with Victor Frankenstein, but with a man of the sea, Captain Robert Walton. He writes from the northern reaches of the world, where ice drifts like mountains, and the horizon never softens. And he writes not to the world, but to his sister, Margaret Saville, safe in England. Through his letters, the first notes of this tragedy take shape. Walton is a man aflame with ambition. He dreams of discovering a passage through the Arctic to carve his name into history by going where no sailor has gone before. His words are urgent, brimming with energy. He speaks of icy winds that cut the sails, of restless nights, plotting the course on yellowed maps, of a crew hardened by frost and hope alike. Yet for all his command, for all the grandeur of his mission, Walton confesses something more fragile. He is lonely. He longs for a companion, a friend of equal heart and intellect. Though his ship is crowded with men, though his authority is unquestioned, he feels himself isolated, a soul adrift on a sea of silence. He writes to Margaret of this yearning, that discoveries mean little when there is no one to share them with, that triumphs lose their brilliance when no friend can echo them. His ambition wrestles with his solitude, each word of his letters carrying both pride and a quiet ache. And then, as if summoned by fate, Walton's desire for a companion is answered, but in the most unexpected and harrowing of ways. One evening, the ship is trapped in a labyrinth of ice. The men gather at the deck rail, their breath rising in clouds, for on the distant floes they see something strange. A figure, immense and solitary, driving a sledge drawn by dogs. Against the endless white, the figure appears almost spectral, a giant silhouette swallowed by mist. The sailors watch in silence as the apparition disappears into the frozen waste, leaving them with a vision that none can quite name. The following day, as the ship groans against the pressing ice, another figure is spotted, this one much nearer. A sledge, broken and adrift, carries a man, gaunt, half dead, yet noble in bearing. He is not the giant they saw before, but his presence commands immediate awe. The crew pulls him aboard, wrapping him in furs, tending to his fevered body. This stranger, rescued from the jaws of death, speaks little at first. His eyes burn with a strange light. Grief and determination twine together. Walton, who has longed for a friend, feels drawn to him at once. Here is a man who seems carved out of tragedy, yet filled with a mind of immense force. As the stranger recovers, Walton's letters shift in tone. He writes of admiration, of kinship. This man, though fragile in body, carries in his voice the weight of experience, of battles fought not upon seas or maps, but within the very soul. At last, one night when the sky is pale with the northern glow, the stranger speaks. His voice is deliberate, heavy with sorrow. He tells Walton that his story is one of warning, that his pursuit of ambition led him into horrors that no man should repeat. He sees in Walton the same fire that once consumed him, the hunger to break limits, to command knowledge beyond measure. "Do you share my madness?" he asks, eyes fixed upon the captain. "Do you also wish to tread where man was never meant to walk? Then hear me before you follow me into ruin." And so, upon the frozen sea, as the ship drifts among glaciers like cathedrals of ice, the stranger begins to speak. His name is Victor Frankenstein, and his tale will unearth both the triumph of human genius and the abyss into which it can fall. Act 2. Victor's Childhood and the Path of Knowledge. I was born in Geneva, a city framed by mountains and nourished by the waters of the lake. My earliest memories are not of grandeur or privilege, though my family was well respected, but of warmth and affection. My father, Alphonse Frankenstein, carried a dignity softened by kindness. My mother, Caroline, was a woman of gentle spirit, her heart given wholly to the care of her children. In our household, love was not merely a word. It was the very air we breathed. Into this circle of tenderness came Elizabeth Lavensa. She was not my sister by blood, but by gift. My mother, moved by compassion, had brought her into our home, and from that day she was to be mine, mine to protect, to cherish, to see as the bright star in my life. Elizabeth's presence filled our home like sunshine spilling through windows. She was calm where I was restless, serene where I was impetuous. To my young heart, she seemed less a companion than a treasure set apart from the world. Nor was Elizabeth alone in shaping my boyhood. My friend Henry Clerval was as dear to me as a brother. His spirit was lively, his imagination quick to conjure stories of knights and heroes. While Elizabeth inclined toward poetry and beauty, Henry longed for tales of chivalry and bold adventure. I, meanwhile, was drawn toward the hidden forces of nature. Between us three, a harmony was struck: Elizabeth's gentleness, Henry's fire, and my curiosity. Those early years glowed with an innocence that now seems like a dream. The gardens of our home, the mountains beyond Geneva, the walks by the lake, all were touched with a kind of golden light. Yet within me stirred something restless, something that sought not only to admire nature, but to penetrate her secrets. It began innocently. I found on a shelf a volume of Cornelius Agrippa, an alchemist whose writings spoke of hidden knowledge, of elixirs that could banish disease, of secrets that might conquer death itself. My father, catching me with the book, dismissed it with a passing word: "Do not waste your time with such nonsense, Victor." But he did not explain. He did not warn me why such ideas were dangerous. And so, what might have been easily checked grew instead into fascination. The spark had been lit. From Agrippa, I passed to Paracelsus, and then to Albertus Magnus. Their pages intoxicated me. They promised that nature was not a prison, but a riddle, and that with courage and intellect it might be solved. While other children played at sport, I played at the mysteries of lightning and magnetism, dreaming that I, too, might uncover the secret fire that animates the world. The first time I witnessed the power of nature's true force was during a storm. A bolt of lightning struck an oak near our home, shattering it into splinters. I stood in awe, trembling before that raw energy. Here, I thought, was the hand of God made visible, a power greater than all the alchemist's words. From that moment, my curiosity shifted. The ancient magicians stirred my imagination, but the scientists of modern times showed me that knowledge might be built not on spells, but on laws. Still, I was restless. My mother, sweet Caroline, gave me her tender care, yet fate had marked her for sorrow. Elizabeth fell ill with scarlet fever, and my mother, in her devotion, tended her at the bedside. Elizabeth recovered, but my mother did not. I can still hear her last words, spoken with calm resignation. She entreated us to remain united, to care for one another, and with a final blessing upon Elizabeth and me, she departed from this world. Her death marked my heart with grief, but also with a vow that I would devote myself to mastering the secrets of life, so that death might never again snatch what was beloved. It was not ambition then, but love and anguish that drove me forward. Yet ambition, like a seed, had already been planted. Soon after, I left Geneva for the University of Ingolstadt. The parting was bitter. Elizabeth's tears, Henry's embrace, my father's solemn pride. Yet my heart burned with anticipation. I was to step into a world of learning, a place where the mysteries I craved might unfold. At Ingolstadt, I encountered my true guides, Professors Waldman and Krempe. Krempe, stern and scornful, dismissed my earlier studies in alchemy as foolishness. Waldman, however, spoke with gentleness. He acknowledged the errors of the past, but urged me to see that modern science could build upon even the misguided dreams of those who came before. His words struck me like prophecy. The ancient teachers promised much and delivered little. The modern masters promise little, but perform wonders. It was as though a door had opened before me. I threw myself into study with an energy that consumed every waking hour. Chemistry, anatomy, natural philosophy, I devoured them all. I haunted the dissecting rooms. I lingered in charnel houses, seeking to trace the fine line between matter and the spark of life. Sleep became a stranger, and the society of men an afterthought. My companions were beakers, scalpels, and the silent company of the dead. There were nights when the city lay dark, but my lamp still burned, my hands trembling over bones and sinews. I asked myself a question that grew ever louder. If death is only the stilling of the body, then what if I could rekindle it? What if I could summon the very principle of life itself, and from the cold clay call forth breath? My professors could not answer this question, for they had never dared to ask it. But I dared. The glory of such a triumph dazzled me. To banish disease, to prolong life, to pierce the veil of mortality. Was it not a noble pursuit? Was it not worthy of any sacrifice? And so I pressed forward, heedless of all else. Letters from home went unanswered. The seasons changed, autumn, winter, spring, and still I labored, driven by a fire that consumed my youth and my health. My cheeks grew hollow, my eyes fevered, yet I cared not. For I was on the verge of a discovery that would place me among the gods. Yet even as I write these words, I feel a shiver, for in those hours of triumph, I did not see the shadow that trailed behind me. I thought I was climbing toward light, but in truth, I was descending into a darkness from which there could be no return. Act 3. The Birth of the Creature. When I recall the years I spent in my pursuit, they appear now as a fever dream. My health withered, my body grew gaunt, yet I pressed on, consumed by the single purpose that burned within me. I had resolved to break the final barrier, to wrest from nature the secret she guarded most fiercely, the principle of life itself. Day after day, night after night, I labored in solitude. I haunted graveyards and charnel houses, scavenging among decay and ruin for the raw materials of my creation. My hands, once innocent of such horrors, grew accustomed to the cold touch of lifeless flesh. To the living I became a stranger, to myself a shadow. Yet always I saw before me the dazzling vision of success. I would not simply discover life's principle. I would bestow it, pour it into a form of my own design. I resolved that if I were to create a man, he should be magnificent, towering in stature, beautiful in proportion. I gathered limbs of great strength, features of noble outline. I believed I was building a being worthy of admiration. What I did not see, what I refused to see, was how the very materials of corruption would mar the beauty of my design. The seasons turned as I worked. Winter snows gave way to spring blossoms, but I did not lift my head from my labor. Friends were forgotten, family neglected. Elizabeth's tender letters went unanswered, Henry's cheerful voice unheard. All that mattered was the table before me, the instruments of my trade, and the silent form that slowly took shape beneath my trembling hands. I toiled until my eyes burned with sleeplessness, until my heart throbbed with fever, and at last, after months of agony, the night came when all was ready. The creature lay before me, assembled limb by limb, a giant of nearly 8 feet, his body vast with strength, his features carefully chosen. I had dreamed of beauty, of majesty, but as I gazed upon him in the stillness of my chamber, I felt a shiver. The yellow hue of his skin scarcely concealed the muscles beneath. His hair flowed black and luxuriant, but his watery eyes seemed dull and vacant. His lips were thin, his complexion sallow, and even in lifelessness there was something revolting in the contrast between noble design and ghastly execution. Still, I pressed on. I had prepared for this moment too long to falter now. The storm raged beyond my windows, lightning flashing across the heavens, as though nature herself waited to see the outcome. I set the final instruments to their task. My heart pounded, my breath came ragged. I whispered aloud, though no ear could hear, "Live, live, and justify my labor. Live and crown me with triumph." And then it happened. A twitch, a convulsion of the hand, a stirring of the chest. The dull eyes opened and looked upon me. My triumph should have been complete. I had succeeded. I had taken lifeless matter and clothed it in vitality. I had become a creator, a father of a new species. But the joy I had imagined did not come. Instead, horror seized me. For in that first movement, in that first gaze, I saw not majesty, but monstrosity. The contrast was too great, the dream too shattered. The beauty I had sought to fashion appeared instead as grotesque distortion. His eyes, watery and pale, blinked with a sluggish awareness. His mouth opened, revealing a grimace that seemed a parody of human expression. He breathed, a coarse, rattling sound, and reached out a hand as though to claim me. I recoiled. Terror flooded my veins. The thing I had labored for, the thing I had so longed for, now filled me with loathing. I rushed from the room, unable to endure the sight. My heart pounded as I stumbled through the darkened house. At last, exhausted, I collapsed into uneasy sleep. But sleep did not bring peace. I dreamed of Elizabeth, radiant and smiling. I took her in my arms, only to feel her flesh grow cold, her lips turn blue. She became the lifeless form of my mother's corpse, grave-wrapped and decayed. I woke with a cry, drenched in sweat, and there he stood. The creature, my creature, bent over my bed, his eyes fixed upon me. His lips parted in what seemed a grin, and he stretched out his hand as though to caress or claim me. A scream tore from my throat. I fled once more, down the stair, out into the night, heedless of the storm and the rain that lashed against me. I wandered the streets until dawn, a soul pursued by its own shadow. When morning broke, I sought refuge in the bustle of the city. The ordinary life of others seemed to mock my torment. I knew not where to turn. At last, I encountered Henry Clerval, who had come to Ingolstadt to study. His presence was like a balm, a reminder of innocence and friendship. But as he looked upon me, his joy turned to alarm. He saw at once what I had become, my face pale, my eyes haunted, my frame trembling with exhaustion. He urged me to rest, and I, too weak to resist, consented. Days passed in delirium. Henry nursed me, spoke to me gently, until at last the fever broke and clarity returned. Yet still I dared not speak of what had occurred. My lips were sealed by shame, my heart by dread. And what of the creature? When at last I summoned courage to return to my chamber, I found it empty. The bed was bare, the room silent. He had vanished. Was it deliverance or doom? I knew not. All I knew was that the being I had fashioned now walked abroad in the world, alone, unloved, and unshackled. From that day forward, my life was marked by fear. Fear that he would return. Fear that others would discover what I had done. Fear that my crime against nature would demand a price far greater than I could bear. And thus, what had begun as ambition ended in horror. The dream of glory gave way to a waking nightmare. I had dared to play the role of creator, but in my folly, I had unleashed a being who would haunt me forever. Act 4. The Creature's Story. Victor's voice faltered as he recalled those first terrible hours after the creature's awakening. His eyes, fevered with memory, turned to me, and then he spoke of how his creation vanished into the world. It was some time later, upon a desolate mountain path, that he encountered the being again. And here the tale shifted, for the creature demanded to be heard. His words were not the growls of a brute, but articulate, measured, filled with a strange eloquence. "I will tell you my story," he said, "and you will listen. For I was not born a fiend. Misery made me one." And so, with the wind howling across the rocks, the creature recounted the tale of his first days, the awakening. I remember nothing before the moment I opened my eyes. Darkness broke into light, and sensation rushed upon me, a torrent I could not understand. My limbs trembled, my breath rasped. I was clumsy, awkward, like an infant, yet trapped in a body immense and powerful. Hunger gnawed at me. Cold bit into my skin. The world was vast, terrifying, and I was alone. I wandered in forests, stumbling, falling, learning with each painful step. The sun warmed me by day, the moon chilled me by night. When rain fell, I sought shelter. When hunger drove me, I plucked berries or drank from streams. Every act was discovery, every sound a mystery. I found fire, left by wandering peasants, and learned its warmth, but also its sting, I burned my hand, cried out in anguish, yet returned, for its glow comforted me. I stole embers, nursed them, and learned to keep flame alive. Fire became my first companion. The hidden cottage. Still I wandered until I came upon a small cottage, nestled against the edge of a wood. Within lived a family, an old blind man, and with him a young man and woman. I dared not approach, for when others had glimpsed me before, they had shrieked in terror and fled. Instead, I made myself a hidden shelter nearby. From there, I watched them through cracks in the wall, unseen yet drawn to their kindness. I observed how they cared for one another, how the young man labored in the fields, how the young woman sang softly as she prepared their simple meals. The old blind man listened to their voices with a smile of peace. Though poor, they gave what they had freely. Their tenderness stirred something in me I had not known, longing. I wished to join them, to share in their warmth, but I knew I was hideous. I had seen my reflection in water, the distorted visage, the yellow eyes, the twisted grin. What love could they offer a monster such as I? Learning to speak. Yet even from afar, I gained much. By listening, I learned their words. Slowly, painfully, I imitated their sounds, shaping them upon my clumsy tongue. What delight I felt when I first repeated their speech in secret, like a child learning from patient parents who never knew I was there. In their stories, I heard of the world, of nations, kings, and history. I learned of love, of virtue, of human society. My mind, once blank, filled with knowledge, and with knowledge came sorrow. For I understood then what I lacked: companionship, kinship, acceptance. One day, strangers came to the cottage, travelers from abroad, and the young woman read aloud from a book to them. That book was Paradise Lost. Ah, what torment it brought me! For in Adam I saw myself, created, longing for his Creator's love. But unlike Adam, I had no beneficent God, no guardian. I was abandoned. In Satan, too, I saw myself, rejected, cast out, consumed with envy of man's happiness. Thus I stood between angel and fiend, knowing not to which I belonged. The plea for companionship. At last I resolved to reveal myself to the family. I thought perhaps the old blind man, untroubled by sight, might hear my voice and perceive the goodness in me. One day, when the younger ones had gone, I entered the cottage. My heart throbbed as I knelt before the old man, speaking with trembling words. I told him I was unfortunate, unloved, that I sought only the comfort of a friend. He listened kindly, assured me that virtue and compassion were not bound to appearances. For a moment, hope blazed within me. But then the door opened. The young man and woman returned. They saw me, and their cries shattered that fragile hope. The young man seized me, struck me, drove me from the cottage. Their terror, their hatred, it was more than I could bear. I fled into the forest, my heart burning. The one chance I had grasped was torn away, and with it, the dream that I might ever find a place among mankind. Rejection and rage. Loneliness turned to bitterness, and bitterness to rage. I cursed the day of my creation. Why had I been made only to suffer? Why had my Creator fashioned me so monstrous, then abandoned me to misery? In my anguish, I lashed out. The cottage, my sanctuary, my place of learning and hope, I set it to flames. The fire roared, as the family fled into the night. Their cries echoed in my ears, but I did not falter. If I could not have their love, then I would leave them only ashes. I wandered again, carrying within me not innocence, but fury. Wherever I went, men fled at the sight of me. Stones were hurled, weapons raised. Always I was hunted, always despised. And always one thought burned brighter. I would find my Maker. I would confront him who had brought me into this world of torment. The turning point. And so I sought Victor Frankenstein. I followed the traces of his home, the rumors of Geneva. On the road, I encountered a child, innocent, unarmed. My heart stirred with a thought. Perhaps this one, young and uncorrupted, might accept me. But when I approached, the boy cried out, struggling, declaring himself the kin of Frankenstein. At that name, a red mist clouded my mind. In my rage, I silenced him forever. Then I realized what I had done. Blood stained my hands, and with it, my soul. Yet in that terrible act, I felt power. If I could not inspire love, I would compel fear. If I could not win a companion, I would drive my creator to share in my misery. I found the home of a young woman, Justine Moritz, and in her clothing I placed a token of the child, so that guilt would fall upon her, and her life would be forfeit. Thus did I bind Victor to me in chains of suffering. The demand. The creature's voice, though steady, quivered with the weight of his tale. He fixed his gaze upon Victor, and in that gaze was both sorrow and accusation. I did not choose to be. I was made and abandoned. You, my creator, owe me recompense. I ask not for riches, not for glory. I ask for one thing only, a companion, a being like myself, who will turn from me with no disgust, who will share my exile. Grant me this, and I will leave mankind forever. Deny me, and I will pursue you with vengeance until the end of your days. His voice echoed against the rocks, fading into the silence of the mountains. Victor stood trembling, torn between horror and pity, between the duty he owed mankind and the guilt he owed his creation. Act 5. Vows, Ruin, and the Frozen End. The creature's demand hung in the air like a sentence, a companion, or a life of vengeance. Victor stood at the edge of the world, hearing the wind scythe over the glacier and feeling the ache of exhaustion in his bones. He thought of the dead, of little William, of Justine, who had died for a crime she did not commit, and of the living, Elizabeth and his father, all of whom looked to him without knowing what darkness he had unleashed. "I will do it," he said at last. The words seemed to fall from his mouth of their own accord. "I will fashion for you a companion, with one condition. You will flee from the sight of men. You will vanish to the wild places, where no foot treads, and there you will remain." The creature bowed his head, not in triumph, but with a strange gravity. "Swear it, and I swear to you the same." Then he turned and moved away across the ice, a vast silhouette dwindling into mist. Victor returned to Geneva altered. The house felt smaller, crowded with memories of voices no longer heard. His father tried to rouse him to ordinary concerns, to life's steady march. Elizabeth's eyes searched his face for traces of the boy she had known. He answered gently, evasively, and when asked the cause of his melancholy, he pleaded fatigue, study, the burden of loss. None could guess the pact he had made. Yet he could not set to his dreadful task beneath his father's roof. He left with a pretext of travel, took Henry with him for a time, and together they crossed through Germany and then to England. Henry drank in the world like a man starved for beauty. The vaulting spires, the murmuring crowds, the shores hammered by the tide. Victor could scarcely look up from the abyss within him. He was courteous to his friend, even affectionate, but every kindness cost him effort, every smile a small betrayal of the horror he carried. At length, he contrived to separate from Henry and went northward alone to the Orkney Islands, a scatter of wind-battered stones set in a sea gray as iron. There, in a crude hut that trembled in the gales, he gathered his instruments. No one came to call. No voices broke the roar of weather. His lamp cut a small circle of light in a universe of cold. He tried to quiet his conscience. This would be mercy, a cure for the misery he had created, a being fashioned not to harm, but to soothe the unendurable loneliness of another. Yet as he worked, thought uncoiled within him like smoke. What if they hated one another? What if they bred a new race multiplying beyond control? What if, joined in each other's wretchedness, they turned on mankind with a hatred made double? He had believed himself wise once, and look where that had led. There came a night when the lamp flickered, and his hands paused over the half-formed shape before him. He glanced at the window. A face peered in, vast, pale, the eyes glittering in the smear of rain. The creature had come to witness his labor. Victor's heart kicked. He looked back at the table, at the limbs not yet given motion, the lips not yet able to speak. He seized the scalpel. As the creature watched, Victor brought his work to ruin. He cut the sutures, dismantled what he had built, until the table was only a confusion of parts, and the air only the smell of chemicals and brine. A sound rose beneath the howling wind, not a roar, not a sob, but something between them, torn from the creature's chest. He shouldered open the door and stood in the threshold, immense and shaking. "You destroy my hope," he said. "You break your oath." "I break a crime," Victor answered. "I will not set loose another like you." "Another like me," the creature repeated softly, as if testing the shape of grief. His eyes lifted and fixed on Victor with a look that would live in the man's memory forever, a gaze not of mere anger, but of a shattered heart. "I will be with you on your wedding night." He vanished into the storm, leaving a promise that would grow like frost over everything Victor loved. In the morning, the sea lay flat as beaten tin. Victor walked the shore, mind reeling. A boat had drifted loose in the night, small, light, its oarlocks bright with salt. He climbed in, pushed away, let the wind bear him. Perhaps he meant only to gather himself before returning. Perhaps some secret part of him desired the vastness to carry him anywhere else. But the wind freshened and veered. The clouds advanced. The sea rose and shouldered him toward another shore. By evening, he landed among a crowd of strangers who eyed him with suspicion and drew back as one might from a plague. He learned that a body had washed up that morning on their coast, a man strangled. Witnesses had seen a boat like Victor's. He was seized, questioned, and at last brought before the dead. When the cloth was drawn from the face, the earth tilted beneath him. It was Henry. He staggered. He could not breathe. He grasped at the sheet, whispering Henry's name as if he could call him back. The marks at his friend's neck were the signature he knew too well. Between fever and shock, days dissolved. He raved. He was soothed. He raved again. When at last he woke to himself, his father was there, summoned and worn with grief, tenderness in his voice, even as the lines at his eyes deepened. Charges fell away for want of proof, but the judgment that mattered had already been delivered. The creature had claimed his price. They returned to Geneva like travelers to a house after fire. Elizabeth met them with a quiet that was more moving than tears. To soothe his father, to console the last radiant soul of his childhood, Victor consented to what had long been expected. He would marry Elizabeth. The announcement brought a fragile joy to the house, like music heard from another room. Victor smiled, and as he did so, he heard again the words the creature had spoken on the storm-lashed island. "I will be with you on your wedding night." He chose secrecy over trust. He told Elizabeth nothing of the danger stalking them. He armed himself, watched the windows, studied every shadow. On the morning of their wedding, the lake lay mild, a sheet of polished stone. They journeyed to a quiet town with an inn that opened onto the water, and a church whose bell had the soft voice of age. People smiled. Flowers nodded in the gentlest breeze. Victor's hand trembled when he lifted Elizabeth's veil. He saw her clearly then, not as a symbol of the life he had wanted, but as Elizabeth herself, patient, brave, luminous, with hope that love could yet save him from himself. Dusk gathered. Victor told her he must patrol the house, to guard against a threat he would not name. She yielded, only asking, with sudden urgency, that he return soon. He kissed her brow and stepped away. A cry split the air. He ran, struck by a lightning of understanding that made mockery of all his learning. The creature had never meant to kill him on his wedding night. He had come for what would wound most deeply. Victor burst through the door to find Elizabeth fallen across the bed as if in a swoon, her hair spilling like dark water, her throat silent forever. The window rattled. A shape moved in the garden, pale against the trees, and then was gone with a long, fluid stride. Victor's shout was not a human sound. Men came, they pursued, they found no one. The bell at the church tolled and tolled, as if the town itself mourned. By morning, Alphonse Frankenstein, having borne too much, sank beneath his grief and died. The house that had held 100 evenings of laughter and childhood games became a mausoleum. Something in Victor broke, the thing that grieves and the thing that hopes. What remained was iron. He went to the magistrate and told him everything. The man listened gravely, but what can the law do against a being made from Victor's own disobedience to law? He offered sympathy. He spoke of patrols. Victor felt a weariness that was almost calm. He thanked the magistrate and walked out, and in that step he left behind every dream he had once cradled. He had one task now, and it would be his life. He pursued. Across valleys and over passes, through towns where the creature had left the wreckage of food stores and the rumor of terror, Victor followed. When he neared, a token would be waiting. A message carved into the bark of a tree, written in soot on a wall, taunting and tender by turns. "Follow me. You grow thin. Does the winter gnaw at you, Father? I, too, have learned hunger, and I have learned endurance." They crossed the Rhine and the Danube. They came to seas where the gulls screamed and the waves hurled themselves against rocks until they shattered into lace. Victor begged for dogs and sleds in places where men measured time by the brief summer. He slept in snow caves, ate scant rations, and felt his body wear away. A candle consuming itself for its own small circle of light. The creature, made stronger, left caches of food to prolong the chase. It was a mercy, and it was a cruelty. He would not allow Victor Death's escape. At last the world narrowed to ice and wind, the Arctic, where night can be a season, and sound travels strangely, as if it were tired. Victor's sled reeled over floes the size of palaces. The dogs' tongues lolled, their breath steaming in the air. The sea smoked in the cold, and the sky arced like burnished steel. On a day that could have been any day in that endless white, the ice groaned and fragmented. The floe bearing Victor shuddered, drifted, and then carried him away from the last signs of pursuit. He lashed the sled to the most solid span and waited, weapon across his knees, the wind gnawing his bones. In that condition, Captain Robert Walton's men found him and hauled him aboard their ship, locked fast in the pack. The story had now circled back to its beginning, to the letters of a lonely captain and the emaciated stranger he rescued from the ice. Walton, who had set out to make history, discovered another kind of ambition aboard, one man's contest with his own creation. He read in Victor's face the knowledge that every choice had a price, and that genius without wisdom is merely a longer road to grief. He listened as Victor's breath grew more shallow and his voice more intent, as he urged the captain to weigh the worth of glory against the lives of his men. "Do not be as I was," Victor whispered. "Learn from me, if not by my reason, then by my ruin." Storm followed storm. The ship groaned. The crew, their courage ground down by cold, came to Walton with a plea: turn south when the ice breaks. Choose life. Walton stood long at the rail, with the aurora sliding like veils overhead, and in the end he promised them he would abandon the attempt. There was, he found, a kind of triumph in relinquishment. Before the ice relented, Victor's strength failed. He called Walton to his side. "Should you see him," he said, "do not be bewitched by his eloquence. He has a mind that can mirror a man's soul to him until he doubts his own reflection. Know him for what he is, not by nature, but by the choice we both made. I chose ambition without duty. He chose vengeance without mercy." His pulse fluttered like a bird trapped in a net. He spoke Elizabeth's name and Henry's, and then only breath filled the silence. His eyes, which had looked beyond human limits, went still. Walton drew the sheet over his face. Night draped itself over the ship. The lamp at Victor's bedside burned low. Then a shadow rose behind it, tall, gaunt, and silent as cold. The creature stood within the cabin, the angles of his form softened by the wavering light. He looked down at Victor for a long time. When he spoke, it was not to Walton at first, but to the dead. "You are gone," he said. "You who made me and cast me out. You who could neither love me nor forget me. I am alone now, more than ever." Walton found his voice hesitant, for the being had a gravity that unsettled him. "If you feel remorse," he said, "why did you not choose another path? Why did you hunt him without end?" The creature turned. In his face there was a ruin of sorrow. "Because I learned what men are by their answer to me. I came to them with a heart unfilled, and they filled it with stones. I asked for bread, and they gave me the whip. I begged for love, and I was made a spectacle of fear. In the end, I took what power was left to me, to make the one who fashioned me feel as I felt. It is not wisdom, it is not justification, it is only truth. I became what the world believed I was." He knelt, and for a moment he seemed almost to pray. "Do not think I triumph," he said softly. "I look at him, and I see my father, my only mirror. I hated him, but I was always looking for him in the faces of others, hoping to be recognized. Now there is no face left in which I might be redeemed." He rose then, taller than any man Walton had known, and went to the window. Frost feathered the panes. The aurora drew slow glyphs on the sky. "I go to the north," he said. "There is a place where the ice breaks, and the sea is a mouth filled with knives. I will make a funeral pyre of my body, and let the wind bury the ashes in the snow. Then no trace of me will grieve the earth." Walton took a half-step forward. "You speak of death as if it were peace?" The creature's mouth quivered in something like a smile. "Peace is not for me, but silence will do. The world could not grant me a companion. Perhaps the void will grant me an end." He bent once more over Victor, and his great hand hovered above the still chest, not touching, as if the gesture itself were the only tenderness he could bear. "Farewell," he whispered. "If, in another world, there is a place where things are remade, may we both be other than we were." He climbed to the deck and moved into the dark. Men shrank back instinctively as he passed, but none raised a hand. He stepped onto the frozen waste, a shape among shapes, and in moments was another shadow among the ridges of ice. A wind rose and erased his tracks. Soon after, the floes at last parted, and the ship turned south, the creak of thawing ice like bones sighing. Walton wrote his final letter to Margaret with a steadier hand than he had expected. He told her he had learned a lesson greater than the one he sought, that the edge of the world is not a place but a hunger, and that it is no victory to arrive there alone. He enclosed the account of Victor Frankenstein, a warning set down in the hope that some other ardent spirit might read it and choose a different summit to climb. The sea widened, the stars thinned, winter loosened its grip. Yet sometimes, when the sky was clear and the air so still the ship's lanterns burned without a tremor, Walton would look back and imagine a flare in the far north, the end of a pyre, or only the last trick of the aurora. And he would bow his head, not knowing whether to mourn the man who had made a monster or the monster who had been made. Epilogue. On Creation and Consequence. If there is a moral to Victor's tale, it is not that knowledge is forbidden, but that knowledge without mercy becomes a blade we turn on those nearest to us, and finally on ourselves. He sought to conquer death, and he multiplied it. He sought to transcend loneliness by creating life, and he deepened loneliness until it had a voice, and a stride, and hands that could strangle. Yet to listen to the creature is to hear another warning, that what we cast out returns to us in the shape of our fear. He learned hatred because hatred was all the world had for him. He begged for love and was given stones. He begged for understanding and was answered by pursuit. What began in abandonment ended in vengeance, and no one who tells this story can say where the first fault ceased and the second began. So the ice closes, the letters are folded, and the ship turns toward kinder waters. But the question remains, quiet as snowfall. If we make something, a machine, a work, a life, what do we owe it? And if we turn away from that debt, what does the world become? The answer, I think, is written in the silence where the aurora moves. We are makers, all of us, and our creations bear the marks of our hands. It is not enough to bring a thing to life. We must be prepared to love the life we call forth, or else watch it go seeking love in the only language left to it. You've been listening to Fireside Reader. Thank you for joining us for this journey through one of the great classics of literature. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing and returning for more timeless tales, told with care and depth. Until next time, may the words stay with you, and may the fire of storytelling never fade.